What if everything you thought you knew about your favorite stars was just a polished illusion? That's the unsettling question we're about to explore. When you think of Hollywood, your mind probably jumps to glamour, success, eternal youth. But behind the red carpets and flashbulbs lies a truth that's rarely talked about: how fame can rot from the inside out. We're peeling back the curtain on 15 celebrities whose transformations go far beyond aging. Their appearances have changed, yes, but what's even more haunting is how those changes seem to reflect everything they lost along the way. And believe me, when we get to number 7, you'll be asking yourself how it all fell apart so completely. We all click out of curiosity. Maybe you're wondering, like I did, what becomes of the rich and famous when the applause fades? Does the spotlight heal or reveal? Today's list isn't just about looks. It's about the slow collapse of legends who, at one point, owned the world. The kind of stars whose names were synonymous with beauty, talent, even power. Now, their stories read more like warnings than legacies. And as you watch their physical features shift, you'll start to notice something deeper. A reflection of choices, regrets, and reputations burned beyond repair. Chevy Chase is where our countdown begins, and his story might be the most symbolic of all. Once the crown jewel of American comedy, Chase had it all: leading man charm, razor-sharp wit, and a paycheck to match. $7 million of film in the 80s. He didn't just play the clumsy, lovable goof, he owned the role. But it wasn't the pratfalls that brought him down. It was his attitude. His departure from Saturday Night Live after one season raised eyebrows, but what followed left bridges in ashes. Co-stars spoke of his arrogance, his casual cruelty, his need to provoke. Behind the curtain, the laughs were dying. Years later, on the set of Community, his behavior spiraled further. Racist remarks to cast members. Crude comments toward women. Show creator Dan Harmon described it like Chase was testing the limits of decency, seeing what he could get away with. The public watched, slowly turning away, unsure if they were seeing a man stuck in the past or simply showing his true colors. Now 81, his face is bloated, his movements sluggish, and his once smooth voice replaced with a rasp that echoes years of disregard. And still, no remorse. When asked about his reputation, he simply said, "I like who I am." That line may say more than any headline ever could. But if you think that's jarring, wait until you see Madonna. For decades, she rewrote the rules of pop stardom. Reinvention was her weapon, and she wielded it with pride. But lately, her fight against time has turned into something more desperate. At 65, her appearance has morphed so dramatically that fans struggle to recognize her. Tight, immobile features. A doll-like smoothness that masks the expressive face we once knew. But the changes aren't just physical. Her performances feel strained, like she's clinging to youth rather than celebrating her legacy. Social media clips, heavily filtered, often erratic, spark more concern than admiration. What makes it all so tragic is that Madonna had a chance to redefine aging for women in the spotlight. Instead, she's become a mirror for everything they fear. And then there's Steven Seagal, the action star who once embodied quiet strength. His martial arts credentials, his stoic intensity, they made him a box office staple in the 90s. But now, his transformation is nothing short of shocking. Gone is the sleek frame, the powerful aura. At 72, Seagal looks like a shadow of his former self, weighed down by excess and denial. His weight gain is dramatic, his movements stiff and labored, yet he clings to the same black wardrobe and slicked-back ponytail like a costume from a role he can't let go. His martial arts demos now seem more like staged theater than legitimate skill. Watching him is like watching a magician fumble his own trick. The fall didn't stop at his physique. Former co-stars describe him as volatile and intimidating. John Leguizamo recalls being slammed against a wall by Seagal. Others recount similar stories, power plays hidden behind the camera. And yet, the show went on, with Siegel headlining increasingly low-budget action films with titles like End of a Gun and Contract to Kill. Movies where he mostly sits, speaks softly, and lets body doubles do the work. His name used to promise excitement. Now it's met with disbelief. What's even more unsettling is how these transformations seem to align so perfectly with each star's personal unraveling. It's as if the outer changes were always destined to match the inner ones. Fame can be cruel, yes, but more often, it just magnifies who someone already is. For some, it brings out grace. For others, it uncovers ego, fear, and bitterness. And in the case of Chase, Madonna, and Seagal, the mirrors don't lie. He was once the face that launched obsessions, a magnetic presence on screen with raw charisma and untamed energy. But when Roar traded in his scripts for gloves in the early 90s, it wasn't just a career pivot. It marked the beginning of a stunning physical unraveling. The ring took its toll, delivering not just punches, but permanent changes. After returning to Hollywood, his face told a different story, one of surgeries and regret. Audiences didn't recognize the man who had once set screens ablaze. It wasn't aging that shocked them. It was transformation so stark, it felt like staring at a stranger wearing a familiar name. Time hasn't softened the impact. At 72, Roar is still reshaping his face, but each procedure seems to pull him further from the man he once was. He walks red carpets like a ghost of his former self, determined to outpace time, but losing ground with every step. The sad irony. The more he tries to preserve his youth, the more unnatural his image becomes. It's a painful reminder that Hollywood doesn't just reward beauty, it demands it, even when it's long gone. Then there's Courtney Love, the grunge queen with a snarl for the spotlight and a legacy forged in chaos. In the 1990s, she wasn't just Kurt Cobain's widow or the front woman of Hole. She was the hurricane that swept through rock culture. Her beauty wasn't polished. It was jagged, rebellious, unforgettable. But that kind of brilliance burns fast, and the years haven't been kind. Substance struggles, volatility, and the passage of time have taken their toll. Her face now reflects every battle fought and lost, tightened, altered, yet unmistakably weathered. At 60, Courtney's appearance is a mosaic of attempts to reclaim something already gone. Once famous for unfiltered passion, she's now more often seen as a cautionary symbol. Social media outbursts, public clashes, and a strained relationship with daughter Frances Bean Cobain have painted a heartbreaking picture of a woman grappling with identity, sobriety, and legacy. She's had moments of comeback, flickers of that old fire, but the contrast between who she was and who she's become feels like the chorus of a song that once roared and now whispers. And still, when she walks into a room, the ghost of that electric presence lingers, faint, flickering, but undeniably there. Axl Rose once ruled the rock world with fury in his voice and venom in his stare. When Guns N' Roses exploded in the late 80s, he was the poster child of everything dangerous, magnetic, and unforgettable about rock and roll. Snake-like on stage, his banshee wails tore through arenas. But now, that same voice falters. That same body hesitates. The red bandana remains, but the fire behind it has dimmed. Seeing him today is like watching a storm reduced to a drizzle. He no longer soars through "Welcome to the Jungle." He stumbles. Live shows are riddled with awkward moments, backup singers covering the high notes that once came effortlessly. Fans watch with a mix of loyalty and heartbreak. And in rare flashes of candor, Axl has acknowledged the shift, admitting he's not who he once was. It's those moments, those glimpses of honesty, that hit hardest, because they show a man painfully aware of the myth he once embodied, and the reality he can no longer outrun. Then there's Brigitte Bardot, a name once synonymous with beauty itself. In the 1950s and 60s, she was more than a screen siren. She was an international sensation, redefining sensuality with every appearance. But the woman the world sees now at 89 is almost unrecognizable, not just physically, but ideologically. She left Hollywood behind, embracing activism and seclusion on her remote estate in Saint-Tropez. But as her appearance aged naturally under the Mediterranean sun, her public persona grew increasingly controversial. No longer the embodiment of youthful freedom, Bardot became known for divisive political views, incendiary comments, and multiple convictions for hateful speech. Her face, untouched by cosmetic surgeons, bears the full imprint of time and weather. But it's the bitterness behind the words that casts the deepest shadow. The transformation is staggering, not because of wrinkles or aging skin, but because of how joy gave way to anger. The woman who once embodied joie de vivre now radiates resentment, her legacy tangled in the thorns of her own rhetoric. But nothing quite prepares you for the descent of Marlon Brando. His early career was cinematic lightning, raw, instinctive, impossible to look away from. In A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront, he wasn't acting. He was being. He was every man's envy, every woman's fantasy, a storm in human form. Yet over the decades, Brando's story mutated from brilliance into something almost mythical in its collapse. His weight ballooned, his behavior spiraled. By the time he filmed Apocalypse Now, he arrived vastly unprepared and physically unrecognizable, demanding massive paychecks while offering little effort. Crew members reportedly had to feed him lines through an earpiece. He played games with time and money, infuriating directors and alienating co-stars. But even that chaos paled next to his time on the island of Dr. Moreau, where he reportedly wore an ice bucket on his head and demanded a miniature actor mimic his every move. The stories are surreal, sometimes almost funny, until you remember who this man was. Once a cinematic prophet, he devolved into a parody. His family life crumbled in tragedy. His son imprisoned, his daughter lost in heartbreaking circumstances. Though these events weren't Brando's doing, those close to him often point to a pattern: emotional distance, unstable parenting, and a household where genius and dysfunction coexisted. In the end, Brando became a recluse on his Tahitian island, devouring ice cream at night and retreating into a world of eccentric habits and solitude. By his death in 2004, he was nearly 400 pounds, dependent on oxygen, and largely abandoned by those who once adored him. The fire that once redefined acting had long since burned out. And yet, when we revisit the early footage, the swagger, the voice, the eyes that saw everything, it's impossible not to feel a pang. Because Brando didn't just fade. He fell, hard. His final roles barely resembled the icon he once was. And that's the haunting truth behind so many Hollywood legends. Sometimes the brightest stars leave behind the darkest shadows. What began as Hollywood royalty turned into a slow-motion collapse that played out in front of millions. Lindsay Lohan once sparkled on screen with the kind of charisma that promised a lifelong career. Yet within a few short years, that potential was shattered by a whirlwind of public missteps. Her downward spiral wasn't hidden in whispers behind studio doors. It was paraded across front pages, each headline more heartbreaking than the last. From multiple run-ins with the law to rehab stints, her transformation wasn't just personal, it became symbolic of the price of early fame. Photos captured her drastic physical decline, her features worn and bloated, her once youthful glow replaced by a tight, unnatural mask from too many cosmetic procedures. The girl who starred in The Parent Trap now looked like a cautionary tale. And though she's tried to rebuild in Dubai, choosing quieter roles and retreating from the chaos of LA, the scars, both emotional and physical, still speak louder than any comeback. Nick Nolte, once crowned People magazine's sexiest man alive, also couldn't outrun the toll of addiction and time. In the 1980s, his rugged charm lit up films like 48 Hours, but decades of substance abuse eroded that magnetism. The most infamous photo of Nolte, a mugshot with wild hair and dazed eyes, became a cultural reference point. But behind that viral image was a man grappling with his own demons. His weathered voice, slumped frame, and snow-white hair are no longer the signs of aging, but reminders of battles lost along the way. Despite it all, he continues to act, now playing roles that reflect the brokenness he's lived through. There's something haunting about watching him on screen now, a shadow of his former self, yet still compelling because the pain is real. And that pain is what makes his story resonate. Terrence Howard's journey veered down a stranger path, not marked so much by physical deterioration as by public alienation. He rose fast, securing an Oscar nod for Hustle and Flow, and landing a coveted role in Iron Man, only to lose it all to contract disputes and behavior that left even seasoned professionals baffled. The man who once brought elegance to red carpets became known for odd interviews, legal entanglements, and baffling theories about math that derailed his credibility. When he walked away from acting to pursue something he called truth through his own logic, many wondered if it was brilliance or breakdown. Today, at 55, he seems older than his years. Not from age, but from the weight of public scrutiny and internal chaos. His charm remains, but it's wrapped in unpredictability. What's most tragic is that he was poised to be a generational talent. Instead, he became a symbol of potential lost to volatility. Gary Busey's transformation might be the most surreal of all. From Oscar-nominated actor to reality TV eccentric, his trajectory is a wild ride that started with brilliance and ended in bafflement. After a devastating motorcycle accident in 1988 left him with a severe brain injury, everything changed. His speech, behavior, even facial expressions shifted. The charming actor who once portrayed Buddy Holly with electrifying realism was replaced by a figure who appeared increasingly erratic and often mocked for his bizarre outbursts. His facial features exaggerated with time, his teeth overly prominent, and his interviews almost too strange to believe. Busey didn't just age. He became unrecognizable. Yet through reality TV, he carved out a new identity. Part curiosity, part cautionary tale. At 80, his eccentricity overshadows the fact that once, he had real depth as an actor, and that loss feels especially acute. Then there's O.J. Simpson, the most chilling fall from grace on this list. Once a sports legend and television darling, his smiling face was as familiar as the nation's flag. But after the infamous trial of the 1990s, where he stood accused in one of the most polarizing criminal cases in American history, the O.J. the world once loved disappeared. His decline didn't happen overnight, but it was definitive. Years in prison left him physically diminished, slow, heavy, visibly aged. The swagger of his NFL days was gone, replaced by the limp of a man no longer in command of his own legacy. His final public appearances, often captured by curious onlookers or social media, were filled with stilted smiles and haunting silence. Simpson, who died in 2024 at 76, leaves behind a story that morphed from triumph to tragedy in the eyes of millions. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was a total erasure of the hero he once was. Each of these stories reveals something deeper about celebrity. A chilling pattern emerges. Early fame followed by excess, denial, and desperate attempts to cling to relevance. The glitter fades, and what's left behind is often a shell of talent, of youth, of identity. Among them, Lindsay Lohan offers perhaps the clearest window into the financial extremes of Hollywood. At her peak, Lohan's earnings soared. Multi-million-dollar film contracts fashion deals and endorsements padded her bank account. She reportedly owned luxury vehicles like a black Porsche 911 Carrera, a white Maserati Quattroporte, and a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Her watch collection included pieces from Rolex and Cartier. Real estate? She snapped up a $2.5 million mansion in Los Angeles and later moved into a Dubai penthouse with private security and concierge service. Private jet trips were common, often captured by paparazzi. Over the years, her business ventures ranged from a failed beach club in Mykonos to lifestyle brands. She carried hefty insurance policies to protect film contracts, some of which were canceled due to instability. Her story offers this lesson: rapid wealth with no discipline leads to chaos. The illusion of invincibility can't protect you from yourself. These tragic arcs stir something in us, not just gossip or curiosity, but reflection. These were once the brightest stars, now flickering reminders of how quickly it can all fade. The illusion of fame is seductive, but behind the curtain, the cost is often devastating. And we're left asking, was it worth it? Or was the spotlight always too hot to survive? And there you have it, the full backstage pass to Roy Orbison's life. Loves, heartbreaks, and the legacy that still sends shivers down our spines every time Crying or Oh, Pretty Woman hits the speakers. From tragedy to triumph, from black shades to platinum records, Roy lived a life as hauntingly beautiful as the ballads he wrote. We saw how fame couldn't shield him from personal loss, how his gentle spirit endured the cruelest blows, and how even when the spotlight dimmed, his voice kept burning bright. Roy wasn't just the Big O. He was a giant wrapped in velvet sorrow and rock and roll soul. If you felt the emotion, learned something new, or just vibed with the journey, hit that like button, drop a comment below with your favorite Roy Orbison song, and subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive into the legends who shaped music history. Trust us, what we've got coming next is just as jaw-dropping. And remember, legends never truly leave us, especially not when they sing like angels and cry like poets. Roy once said, "I may be a living legend, but that sure don't help when I've got to change a flat tire." Stay legendary, folks, and we'll see you in the next story.